We are here just to, to do another talk and a discussion, kind of very informal, like a talk show and television. I have 2 stars, so that's I'm doing the David Letterman situation. And welcome to the Salon. And here also we have slides or images showing about works by Cecchini and by Antony Gormley that has been done in about 90 works each. So you have a kind of avalanche of information for the people who doesn't know the works. And the first question that I would like to start is a kind of general question because, I think it's important for the specialized audience, but also the general audience, to discuss the general trends of the, not contemporary art, but a situation that shifts, from my generation, they are younger than me, the idea that why at a certain moment in the 90s, there was a shift between the kind of minimal reductionist form to a certain way, a figuration, a story, a representation. Why this shift was a need, was a counter reaction against a certain moment in history because it was too abstract, was too ephemeral, too material, and the need to go back to the human figure on one part, perhaps your own human figure, or the context, let's say the environment, the space, the architecture. So this is the first question. The second question, try to relate both.
Let's do them one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah. Because otherwise you'll forget the questions and then you won't be able to really help us evolve.
Okay,
he said that I was going to do some of the talking and Loris is going to do some of the talking, but he's going to lead us. I mean, I think, Germano, the truth is that Judd's assertion that the independence of art resulted in a work which he called the specific object that had absolutely no reference to anything but itself is in a way a point zero for me, a point zero. And growing up as a young artist, I think that there was no question that we saw a kind of logical progression in the evolution of the languages of art that led, I guess, to that minimal absolute 0 point. And I guess in the manner of Bruce Nauman walking about in his own studio, asking what is a job worthy of the calling of an artist, I just had to return to first-hand experience. And that meant returning to the body, but not as an object, as the place of experience. How about you?
I think that for our generation it's been different because during the 90s we tried to go back to the narrativity of the object and the body also. Also because the filming, the photography, they comes out in a different way. And I think we need to tell stories about the life, about what's the life, what's the reality, and what's the fictionality. So this moment in the 90s, I remember Baudrillard, for example, when he said something about the reality, the lost reality. And maybe what Antony says about the centrality of the artwork comes out again later, respect the 90s.
So you think, Antony, that the anchorage of walking in space by Bruce, let's say, and relate both elements, body and space, was a kind of need of an anchorage of an identity that grows, because we have to remember that also there was a kind of moment of expressionism,
Yeah, but that we want to forget, don't we?
No.
We don't want to forget it. I think there was, the new spirit in painting and kind of that moment of, in a way, a very predictable reaction to, you could say, the classical Puritanism of minimalism. There was this European kind of reaction against that, with a return to, I think, a moment of Die Brücke and Die Blaue Reiter, of a kind of
metaphysics,
European expressionism, and I think that was a retardataire moment. I think why I pinpoint Naumann is that he reinforces first-hand experience, and the idea that actually, being itself, and this is, I think the critical thing here is replacing the idea of the autonomy and the importance of the object per se with an idea of, maybe Loris's also idea of a narrative, but it's not the narrative that is represented in the work. It's the narrative of the viewer going through the experience of.
So it's not an illustration. It's based on the experience. It's mostly with the idea that the point of reference is your body, and you start from change reality, not with a narration, but with an action inside a space.
Yeah, I guess the equation for me, in terms of the way that I make these works, for instance, is it starts from a lived moment of a particular body, a subjective experience of a particular body. It's left as some kind of evidence, some kind of forensic evidence, a indexical, non-symbolic, non-representational image that then, hopefully, is an empty space, like a black hole in a context, and it invites then the first-hand physical experience of the viewer to project onto it. And I think this is a radical, in my view, this is a radical change in the functionality of art, that instead of either being, as it were, pure formal beauty, or a representation of something that might be considered beautiful, in a way, the viewer has to work in making something out of this, whether we call that meaning, but making something, attending to the experience of engaging with the work. And I think this is.
I agree with Antony, because also trying to formulate spaces that are involving the viewer in the sense of transfigurating the space. So the viewer is active in that direction, and he changes the destiny of the object, of the space itself, completing the space in a sense.
But you think it's the need to be kind of a performative situation of the space and architecture from inside, from the outside, or vice versa?
I think so, because it's a sensibility, a sensitive space,
But you want too that the viewer react to the space,
absolutely,
touch, get involved, has to do with the fluidity.
Yes, also because we lost the corners in a sense. In 20 years of technology, culture, design, and so on, I think in a sense, we have lost the sense of the corner. So this kind of fluid approach is a cultural, is philosophical, but also not only aesthetical.
But do you think that the void, because both of you are dealing with the void, because if there is no more corner, there is no more reference to the reality, you are involved in finding the control of the void through a figure, through a person, and you through the control of the environment or the space?
I think, for me, I think we're moving now from, as it were, the condition of embodiment, incarnation, as the first condition, the first body, to the condition of architecture as the second body. And for me, I always end up saying this, now that we know that over 50% of human beings, our species, Homo sapiens sapiens, live within the urban environment. In other words, we are attached to our made habitat. We don't deal anymore with the elements in a direct one-to-one way. And I think that sculpture, I think what Loris has just said, in a way challenging the corner, challenging the way in which physically we are contained within architectures that, yes, increasingly with parametric design, they have begun to become sculptural, but traditionally in the urban grid and the way that architecture is a pillar and lintel form of construction, we live within 90 degrees. And I think this dialogue asking us to reconsider space itself as a second body, so far as I'm concerned, is a natural extension of going back to what is the experience of being in the first body.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But in a sense, I mean, losing these corners give us the experience of a new space, I think, to this parametrical architecture. And I think now is an important culture of an important part of a sort of new feeling respect nature. Why nature is so important in our life. Also because from 10 years now, technology goes to nature also in terms of calculation. So it became again a part of the landscape, and I think it shifts the feeling of the space now.
It's intriguing that, because I think, I don't know how many of you have seen the work Drift that I have here. I mean, this is an entirely, you could say, organic crystalline matrix that follows very precise geometries, tetrahedral nodes, 4 elements coming together to a single point. But at the same time, it is completely random. You could say it's aleatoric. It has a organic rhizomic development. And I think you could say that the dialectic between body and structure, or body and architecture, between emotion and geometry, is another very, very rich vein of, I think, contemporary investigation in both visual art, but also in science. So if we think of the way in which quantum mechanics or biotechnology is beginning to mine the implications of a real understanding of both the genome and, for instance, the complex hexagonal structures of carbon and how it mutates through all life forms, I think this is another really rich vein in terms of what Germano is pushing for. Why we are, in a way, getting away from the purity of art as an independent status object.
Yeah, to go back to Judd, I'm coming from an experience where in California, in Los Angeles, there was an anechoic chambers. The anechoic chambers is a chamber where if you scream, you don't hear your voice. The only sound of the anechoic chamber is the rumor of your blood. So you listen to the essential of the inside. So this was 67, 68. I think that the new development is outside of the anechoic chamber. Let's say, what is the reflection of the body, what you call architecture, you would call second skin, no? The second skin, which can be from the dress to anything that you touch, is part of your enlargement. So in the 60s, there was this kind of idea to reverse John Cage or or Jim Turrell, Irving, going inside yourself, listen to the blood, and that's why Naumann is important at the time, because he was 69, he was in Pasadena doing this kind of introverse elements about his own body. And today you have this kind of expansion, which is virtual for a generation and which is still physical. So I can see also that Loris is trying to underline the technological aspect, while you are more physical, not in a sense of not consider technology, but as a part, you're not in the simulation element, and is more touched by, the immaterial conditions. So also, in the difference between both of you, there is already a small shift in time. You think it's real?
But this piece of Antony here is a perfect
that's what I'm talking,
representation of this kind of
expansion.
Virtuality also.
Yeah, but it's physical.
Exactly. It's like something at the microscope, or something like a universe. And in this sense, the particles are making space, are taking place. Just
That's
for a
nice.
citation.
No, I did a piece with Mario here in Poggibonsi called Prende Posto Fai Spazio. Thank you. I wanted to pick up on what Germano just said, because I think for me there was a moment in the 60s which in a sense perhaps we are recovering, and it was Wilhelm Reich's orgone chamber. It was R.D. Laing's the politics, the dialectics of experience. That idea that we cannot afford to ignore in a way the need to observe our own insistence on hermeneutics, the way in which we translate first-hand experience always into language, into in a way symbolic representation. And I think where Loris's work and my work might come together is an urge to return people to the point where, in a sense, they are unknowing. In other words, there is no immediate recognition, because yes, there may be the sense of the place of the body, but it doesn't have a name. It's not doing anything. There is no narrative. And this, again, for me, is a revolutionary use of, you could say, the reference to the body. It is no longer representational. It is simply a catalyst for reflexivity. In other words, inviting you as a viewer to observe your own movement, your own, in a way, reactions. And I think Loris's work, very, very similar. We were both in a show in Tilburg.
2005,
an empty carpet factory. Anyway, a very resonant environment in which thousands of people worked, doing mechanical jobs, and Loris installed this incredibly beautiful, delicate work made of ping pong balls that caught the light coming through the ruined glass roof of this vast factory that had turned to moss and was going green, and you could hear the drips of water coming through the roof. And the work, what it did, it made one feel that space and its dialogue with light and with time and with nature. And I think that, that I mean, I don't know what you feel, Germano, but that way in which art, rather than going back to Judd, wanting to be this thing apart, actually becomes a catalyst through which you begin to attend to your own experience of the world. I think that's a democratic, a positive, an optimistic view of how art can act on the world.
Yeah, that was a moment when the artist or became a seismographer, registering whatever are the events, or a stimulator. So I think that's the area that you both have developed in time, just to create a mirror that is not, as you said, a narrative mirror. Is not talking about what you are doing, no, but how you can enter in a system of perception.
Here's one of Loris's beautiful ping pongers.
And also the problem of being fragile and not fragile. I think that's another element that is particular, which means non-impositive. If you use the small balls, transparent ball, everything, it's a kind of fragility, and that is.
There it is.
Yeah.
This is it. Yeah. What I was just talking about. It's just the most beautiful thing.
I don't know. For me, to use simple materials, very not so precious, like plastics, rubbers. It's been a way to know the technology, in the same time to play with reality. Today, I'm fascinating also from the industrial processes. So the last pieces are huge installations with thousands of industrial modules, and they are very beautiful just in themselves. But the aggregation gives me the possibility to grow like a plant, like an organism. In this sense, at the beginning, the project is very precise, but then I have the possibility to improvise. What you said before about the random possibility, you start from a very detailed situation, and then you try to open it. You try to, like an organism in the space.
And the implication of a work like this that is also rhizomic is that you are looking at the suggestion of, in a way, an object, but it's also a model. It's also a model of potential, of growth. And the viewer, in a way, is not left with something specific. He's left with a possibility. And this, so the idea of endless, infinite progressions, endless, infinite rhizomic expansions. It's the same with my piece here. It's good that it's in a show called Art Unlimited, because that idea of a formal definition, the specific object, keep going back to this point of zero. It's highly controlling. Yeah. And if we believe in the potential of art as a catalyst for in a way expanding human experience, we need it more than ever. We know very, very well, that in a sense, in terms of our relationship with the future, our relationship with the biosphere, in some way there is a fundamental need for a kind of participatory creativity. And I don't know whether this is like pushing it too far, but I think that the spaces of art now, not the objects, the space of art as a place in which possible futures can be debated, can be shared, can be tested, can be experienced. That's where its value is for me.
Yeah, I'm thinking this when he says the space of art, I can see still some cannibalism by the space on art still today, and the desire to create architecture or to expand the work in a way that create its own territory. I think that is the interesting point today to develop, because here you can see unlimited or not unlimited. the space is cannibalizing the object. Can we do a reverse?
So what do you? I mean, you know,
I'm
there's
provocative. But
no, but there's the old kind of truism that art will always, in some way, colonize whatever space is offered to it. But you're suggesting the opposite, that somehow the art is greedily kind of eating the world, wanting to somehow infect it more like potently. I think that, I mean, it's a certainly when we see the rise of phenomena like this is the first time I've ever been to the Basel Art Fair. I find fairs like this rather extraordinary because they are very much an expression of late capitalism and in a way, you know, the need for in a way money that we all know isn't worth anything, to find some hope that it might be worth something. And, you know, people wonder about looking where, you know, this useless, symbolic order, the order of money, might attach itself to something that has kind of real worth. And there is undoubtedly an explosion of the art fair. In other words, the art fair as a seed farm. It's literally a seed farm for the organic model of art, and I think you can see it. I mean, I've only just walked around here for 20 minutes, but you can certainly see that in a sense the colonization of space for its own sake is a strategy of contemporary practice. And I don't know, is that good or bad? I sort of like to feel that art is a benign force in the world, and that it complicates things, makes life more interesting, and probably the more we can have of it, the better.
But you think that if you're on a larger scale, this utopia can be approached? You know, you're starting to do project for architecture, the hotel things. You know, there's some elements of try to create your own territory instead of using the territory.
I think
that's what I see.
But I think you're right. I mean, insofar as architects are trying to become sculptors, maybe sculptors are trying to become architects. I have to accept that there is, and whether this is going to have fruitful results or
I don't know, but
remains to be seen. Should we ask anybody in the audience? Sorry,
we have a few more. How many minutes? 15 more?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, get architecture in. It's your territory.
No, what do you mean?
The expansion. Okay, let's say, you know, when I saw your work, one of the early work, I thought, gosh, it would be great to have a flexible architecture. Okay, the first door, you know, this you know.
Yeah.
But it will be incredible. You know, that's something that changed, but that could be only my interest in architecture. You have a house, it's turning, it's moving, you know, will be a fantastic new landscape. Not only an object, because that was the surprise, and, you know, the implication of your work was, because I was interested in architecture, as I'm still is, you know, what will happen if you have the possibility to do a construction?
At that time was a play with deconstruction. So
sure, but
it was
at the end, the construction created another construction.
Exactly, but you're playing, you're always playing with a model in a sense. Mm-hmm. I think this kind of soft construction, it's possible today. Today you have amazing printers with sand and strange polymers that give you the possibility to build something on the moon, for example. I mean, in terms of possibilities, we are going back to make experiments like the bees in the sand, and just because we need the experience of another space.
I'd like to see one of
Sure.
your rubber
Yeah.
works as in a way, experiential architecture, not in the context of a gallery, but
Me too.
in the street. And I
So
think
you're
that
pushing.
the pneumatic implications of your work, which talks about, in a way, the bubble as architecture, as a kind
The
of
cavity, yeah.
mutable space. I mean, I think, Dali designed a bedroom for Edward James like the stomach of a sick dog that breathed. It was made of leather. Well, now we have, as you say, these polymers, and the idea of, in a sense, making a responsive architecture that is equally, in a way, astructural and kind of fluid, I think, is very, very exciting. And it's as if, there's still a point in which your reference to the Euclidean geometry of architecture, which has then been stripped back, as you say, the deconstruction is still the in a way the conceptual skeleton.
Exactly.
But I can see that actually. Well, I think Germano's quite right. There's an implication there that actually you're inventing a new architectural form.
Why not? I think it's possible. I mean, I've seen systems that are like your pulsing body, because today we talk about skin more than volumes. We talk about surface more than mass, in a sense. And it should be funny. I mean, it requires a very complex systems of connections, but it's possible. I mean, like the external skin of a body. And
you just need to ask Dow Corning to give you a few factory spaces and some.
It's also that company are experimenting about, the new cement is flexible. There's a lot of new material that today is possible to use as a skin, not anymore as a rigid structure. So that could be a way through art, because architecture is very conservative. The clients are very conservative, blah, blah, blah. So in a certain way, the art can suggest, if I think about the first proposal of Klaus Oldenburg, to have a cake-like building, or to have a skyscraper in the form of an ice cream, and then you see the result of a lot of architecture in the 70s. I think that the implication of your work, because it's a part of your work, the idea of space, the idea of container, the idea of enlargement, the idea of flexibility, and not. I think that will be a big contribution, because people always think inside, always think for the apartment, always think for maximum a loft. That's a kind of vision that art is a little bit too constrained for me. Maximum is the arsenale, but then you reduce the arsenale to several white rooms like a gallery. So I think the system of art needs a kick, and that's through the artist, not through any other person.
It's really true. I mean, I love the idea that you can make, in a way, a non-functional architecture, and that is reflexive architecture. And it's very interesting. I mean, this building, the outside of this building, Herzog de Meuron, in a way, making this proposition about architecture becoming porous. It's not, here we have a skin that has been, in a way, opened in exactly the same way that you might make a piece of expanded metal. But it's making a statement about exactly what Loris's work about is making a statement about, which is the opening. Why does architecture have to be deterministic? It can actually be, in a way, a question. And that idea, anyway, I did do one building. I don't think it's on this slides, but you can see the reference to architecture, which is called a sculpture for the subjective experience of architecture. And it was a collaboration with David Chipperfield. It's 3 volumes of 100 cubic meters. Each one, first a cube, then a stretched horizontal, and then a tower. And the whole idea of that really was was the opposite of creating shelter. It was actually to make you think about how you are, in a way, reinforced by or questioned by your immediate environment. And that the notion that architecture in some way aspires to permanence, solidity, to, in a way, allowing you to forget where you are and replacing it with an idea that you should inquire into where you are, inquire into how you move down a corridor, what choices you are offered at the end, whether you go right or left, up or down. I think the notion of implicit narrative that Loris was talking about is an incredibly rich terrain. And that's something also that in my most recent work, Model, I'm trying to mine. So this was a body in the form of a building that was in part of these slides, where in a sense the narrative is the drama between memory and anticipation. You are faced with 20, well, you don't know how many, but it's over 20 chambers with less or more light, where you're uncertain as to whether this wall is actually an aperture or is it solid. So you have a heightened sense of proprioception, and you have to use your oral, like a bat, to know how big the spaces are. You have to use your hands because you're not sure where the edges are. And this, anyway, for me this was really exciting, because it was the first time in a way that the 2 strains of my work, one to try to make an objective correlative of what it feels like to live in a body by making a surrogate body, and the other making these situations or places where people are encouraged to propriocept, to observe themselves, came together in this piece that was both architecture and a body, in which I guess the experience was fully physical of architecture, not giving you certainty, but quite the opposite.
Yeah, it's the idea of, that art is a trap, and you get stimulated.
Good.
No?
I like the idea of art as a trap. Some people like it as a nest. I prefer it as a trap.
Me too. Okay, any question?
You're all too polite.
Yeah, come on.
Come on, we should be like having a Barney here.
Okay, one. Microphone or without? Up. More. Speak louder.
Oh, wait a minute, there's a microphone. We found some technology.
Yeah.
So I'm listening to you talk about geometry and emotion, and then you talk about the experience of like you go away from the reference, the symbolic reference, to create the experience. So lots of folks you work against each other. How do you decide the architect and the body? How do you decide when a work's finished?
I don't think the work's ever really finished. I mean, I think of it all as, in a way, you could say these are all propositions, and they're all, in a sense, experimental and provocations. I think of my bodies are a kind of, or my body sculptures are ammunition that I can deploy. You can deploy them in a room. You can, put them on a wall. You can put them on the beach. You can put them in the mountains. You can put them on the street. And that area of experimentation for me goes wider and wider. So I wrote to NASA first in 1987 asking for them to put one of my works in orbit, but the payload was made it a little tricky for them to agree. But I've now realized that dimensionality is also very important. So actually I'm going to make a nano sculpture which will only weigh about 0.2 of a gram. And I think this has a greater chance of but anyway, I mean, the point is that I think of the whole, my work is unfinished, it's of its nature unfinished. It deals with I think the testing of limits of experience, even you know, the most solid things. You could say another place, the 100 works in the sea. You could say, well, that's a return to, in a way, the first kind of experience of sculpture as a standing body that you place in space. But there it is, put at the edge, put at the interface between water and land.
The piece we have here, the Art Unlimited, how do you, when you're executing it, it's like you have that...
You have to hold the microphone by your, otherwise... Sorry.
And the piece you have here at Art Unlimited,
yeah.
So you have that random construction and that you're explaining. How did you decide when to stop, that it was a finished piece?
Well, there are 27 bits. We made it for Mario's gallery in San Gimignano, and it was... if we'd carried on, nobody could have got into the gallery. So we had to stop. We had to stop, and then that was the gallery in a way. I mean, I often work like that, and Germano is quite right. You start with a space and you use it, and the space in a way is your first material.
That's it.
And so the piece here is a memory of the first space. I don't know if none of you have been to Arte Continua in San Gimignano. I really would suggest that you go, because it's, in terms of the opposite of the white cube, I show in another gallery called White Cube, you couldn't find a most articulate opposite. So it's a 14th century building with a 1930s cinema in it, with a labyrinth of tiny rooms and tunnels on the one hand, and then the room that had this drift in it, which was the first, a lovely vaulted 14th century entrance hall to a quite noble house. But then it went on and on and on. But anyway, I mean, the truth is that you can say a space is a material and defines in a way what is possible. But you could say an event like this is also in a way a possibility that defines what can happen. So, but the main thing is nothing is finished.
That's it.
Hi, Loris.
Hi.
Are your artworks looking for a space, or are the spaces calling for a solution?
I think they're both. It depends from the space. It depends always from the project, no? Antony said that you start from the space, not to feel the space, but to play with waves, with reactions inside the space. So you drive the viewer, but you drive the structure of your work directly with your emotion about this exchange with the space. Sometimes the pieces are spaces, the spaces on the trees, the caravans. For me, the title is Monologue Patterns. In terms of a sensitive space just for one or two people, and the structure itself, the surface of these object spaces, or vice versa, should be read in terms of transfiguration of the space itself. So bubble, transparent, you are in a transparent bubble, or you are in a sort of kaleidoscope. So it gives you a declination. It gives you not only a deformation, but also a new feeling of the space.
How did you make these?
The waves.
Yeah.
The waves
These are
are
sound
also
patterns on water, or?
no. The waves are like for me are like emotional point on the surface of the architecture. They comes out from a scientific software for researching waves, the reaction of the waves, in terms of you know the wavelengths or the starting point. And then I work with the 3D software, and after that we have this. The first model is made with a CNC machine with 5 axes, and then this disc in polyester resin is fixed to the wall and trying to have a sort of camouflaging
And then you
with the
stretch
architecture.
a skin on top.
Exactly.
The last question.
Hello. You speak a lot about the space, but I was also interested in the energy of the material that you use. I mean, you use rubber, you use steel, you use different materials. I mean, can you speak a little bit about this as well? Because, you know, obviously these materials have an impact on the space, which is very different.
The materials comes out from a never-ending curiosity in terms of play with things, and probably for every project you decide to have the right material. I mean, sometimes it's possible to have something more light, and you have to work inside. So plastic is possible just in that sense, because
What is this, for example?
this is steel.
Steel.
This is steel, and the last pieces are made with steel and with industrial processes. And also the bubbles, for example, are produced from a company that produces balloons. And for me, it's been fantastic to have the possibility to play with classical architectures, for example, in Italy or in Europe in general, just to have a dreaming sign and shifting the structure of the classical architecture to a dream, in a sense, like softballs or empty spaces. And the material, it's always a translation of a project, but also a starting point for something else. And it never ends, because for every project you learn other things. And so you go ahead using materials.
The last
If I-
question.
Okay.
Hello, hi. About this magnificent slideshow presentation, you deal, both of you, with the gallery space and nature, a lot of nature. How you feel next to the historical buildings or historical sites?
I think you always start with place, and it's interesting that you could say, yeah, you have the physical dimensions of a room, but it isn't. It's like what Loris was saying about his twin dialogue pieces in the tree. You go and listen to the tree, and I think, you know, when I was asked to do a show in Florence, in the Strozzi. We were very, very aware that this was in the basement. Very aware of not just the history of the building, but the weight of the building, and indeed where you were in the geology of the city. And I think, well, the best example I can give is making the Angel of the North, for example, where I said I don't make art for motorways. It was, I don't do that kind of thing. Well, beneath contempt. But then they sent me a photograph of this hill. And I said, well, what is that hill? Because it looked like an Iron Age burial mound. They said, no, that was the hill made out of the destroyed pithead baths of the St. Anne Colliery, and it marks the spot where there are 3 levels of coal mine seam below. Anyway, you listen to this, and so sites are not simply what can be seen or what can be measured. They are what the human history of that place is. And, you know, we lost our mining industry, we lost our shipbuilding industry, we lost, in a way, that critical relationship between coal, steel, and engineering that was, in the heart of England, the story of the Industrial Revolution. This is an important story. And anyway, in touching this place and listening, in a way, the sense of amnesia that Mrs. Thatcher was so keen for us to forget. Very, very quickly, in 25 years, the entire landscape of the winding heads, the pit, ventilation shafts were lost. Amnesia, total amnesia. And anyway, this idea of listening to a site, not simply just taking it as, in a way, a blank canvas, is important. Would you not agree?
No, I absolutely agree. And what I can say respect nature is I'm living in the countryside from 5 years now, so between the countryside and Berlin. And it's always an important base also. I mean, for those pieces, I'm always there with my daughters looking flowers, leaves, and something like this. So it's always an important starting point. And you try to, you learn everything, something new, every time, from nature. It never ends.
Okay, I want to finish perhaps with a definition, which is always funny for me, but I think an artist is a kind of, as you say, kind of archaeologist, digging in, but at the same time is an acrobat, flying. And I think that's the best for our way of thinking, if you have both history and what the question was, history and future, you know, the acrobat fly in space.
Beautiful. Thank you, Germano.
Thank you.
Good acrobats.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really good.